Welcome. We're working on lesson number 6 of the Algebra 1 curriculum, and today we'll look at domain and range. So the first thing we're going to do is this fun 3-act task, and it is about a little girl coming down a slide. So bum height off the ground is the actual name that was used, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if our kids even know what bum means, so you might have to explain it. But the first thing you're going to do is play the first video, which is very limited in information. And it's going to show the little girl coming down the slide. It does show the seconds in the corner, so they can see that and they can kind of get an idea. But that's just part 1, and then they're going to go on to part 2. And I did give you some things in the slides. Now, here's the thing. With these slides, it depends on your school district, but a lot of school districts limit access to YouTube videos. So this slide may not work for your kids. And also, some school districts restrict access to the camera on the Chromebook so that they can take a picture with the camera on the Chromebooks or their devices. So this may or may not be a slide that you can use, but I did just go ahead and include it in case you can use it. And the way I use this is I would play the video for the whole class. So you might want to delete the link where it says Act 1. But you play the video for the whole class and give them a piece of paper. One side would have grid on it and one side would be plain. That's how I would handle it. And then I would have the kids create a graph. And I would give them very limited instruction on how to create it. But I did tell them to be sure to include height in feet and time in seconds. So I did include that in the descriptor. And then I tell them to take a picture of whatever they created and put it on this slide. And then I had a few questions for them. Was this challenging? Was this simple? What would make this task easier? Type here. Okay, when they do get to Act 2, it does provide more information, and it even slows it down. So it shows a graph. It does a lot to give them some hints. And for this act, I would have them recreate the same graph and use the grid side of the paper so that they can make it a little neater and a little more accurate. And again, they will create labels and they will insert a photo. So you can use this slide if you're able, or they could just do it all on paper. So that's up to you. If you do want to still use this slide deck, you could just delete these 3 slides and just do this entire activity on paper only, and that would be fine. And then they go to the 3rd act, and let's see what that looks like. This was Act 2. And this was Act 2. In Act 2, see, it shows an actual grid. It shows the labels, so now they've got that information if they didn't have it before. And then it shows time in seconds, and it even shows what to count to. And then it repeats it with the time. And then it does it again slowed down. So I think that's right. Let's see. Yeah, see, they do it again, and then they make the time go half as fast so that they can get a really good shot of what's going on. And then finally, on Act 3, it does show the actual graph in real time as it's being created. And then they can decide if they agree with it. Anyway, I did ask one question here to kind of get them thinking. Is this the graph you think is correct? Is there anything you would change? And I did ask the question, is she actually sitting on the ground at the end of that video? So they could even kind of argue about that. You kind of want them to. My goal is for kids not to just accept whatever they're told, but to use some critical thinking to decide if it makes sense, if it's really true. I would say that it probably never did reach 0. She's probably just a little bit above the ground. Because she's sitting on the surface of that slide, which is probably not sitting directly on the ground. But that's up to them to decide that, and they do need to answer the question where it says type here. All right, the next activity that we have listed in this is the Desmos activity. This one is longer. And depending on how much domain and range came up in their middle school mathematics, they may need to spend a good bit of time on this activity in Desmos. So let's take a look. There is no time on this one, so use your best judgment. There are 18 screens on this activity, so it will take a while, but a lot of it is just definitions. There's not much work. So the first slide, they're simply going to click a button to read the definition of the domain. There's a picture with a domain kind of marked off here, and then reading in a graph the domain. So they'll just read that. Try to get them to read it. I know the kids don't like to read something if there's nothing attached to it to do. And then they'll adjust these to make their domain and be precise. And when they do, they're going to come over here and type the minimum value, which appears to be -5, and the maximum value, which appears to be a 7. So, and then it's going to tell them here if they got it right. So if their inequality is incorrect, these won't match, and they need to fix it. If they do match, then they get it. And then this one they're doing, as they try to move this out, you'll notice the numbers just keep going out and out. You can't get to the edge of the graph, and that's by design, because we want to tell them, you know, sometimes it's not going to give you a finite domain. This is infinite. Oh, infinity, sorry. When you type it, it will actually type the symbol. So that should be fun for them to see that they can actually type infinity in the calculator. But they do need to type that in, and then it goes on to give them some practice. So they'll move this and choose an answer. It does indicate if it's right by saying awesome or good, way to go, or whatever. So I'm going to come over here and do this one, and then I'm going to say which one do you think it is. So I'm not going to answer these questions because I don't want to ruin this activity, but anyway, that's what they're going to do. Now when they get through with domain, they're going to basically repeat the same thing for range. Here's a definition, and then they're going to do the same thing using the shading going the other direction. And so they'll put their y minimum and the y maximum, and it'll create an inequality. And the same thing happens here. When they try to fill up the graph, they cannot because it's every real number. And I show them 2 different ways to write it. The preferred method for writing it, at least on my stuff, is going to be this first one. Y is an element of the real numbers is what that stands for. So we'll type it that way later. They don't have to type that today, I don't think. Alright, and then this one goes up forever. It doesn't say great, unfortunately, so that one's not going to check it for them. But you get the idea. This one says great. Alright, and then this last one is something creative. So remember, I've said later they're going to be producing items for their portfolio. So this would be eligible because they're going to create their own function. They want the x to be an element of the real numbers. That just means the graph should go left and right forever. And the range should be greater than or equal to -2. And that means nothing should fall down below -2. So they'll sketch that, and if you want, maybe you could show those off at the end of class to see, to give kids some ideas. If they click on these sliders, they can actually create the domain and range that they want, and then they can kind of draw something within that in this space over here. So let's see, I need my range to be from -2 and up forever because it's greater than or equal to -2. So it has to be in that green spot. So that might help them. They don't have to use it, but it might help them. And that's the last thing on their activity. So the next activity we have is domain and range in context. And this is just titled domain and range, and it's on your slides. So the first thing I did was create a function. I put it in Desmos for them, and they are going to basically complete this task in the Desmos calculator and insert a picture of their table and graph. So here it says the total cost to rent a car in terms of the total number of miles is given by the function. So when you click on this, it's going to take you to a calculator that has that function. And it tells them in a note here what to do. So you're going to take out this Y1 and you're going to replace that with C, open parentheses, X1. And notice it filled in that table. And then on the slide it said use zoom fit. So you're going to click on this plus sign to zoom fit. Alright, so now we can see the line. This next thing it says do is type this next to the equation and then change the question marks to complete the domain. Well, the domain should start at 0 because you can't have less than 0 miles. So we're going to do curly brackets and start with 0. To type less than or equal, you type a less than, then you type an equal, and it will put in less than or equal. And then the highest number in the table was a 100 or 240. So you need to do another less than equal and put 240. So that was the end of that. Alright, so let's go back over here. I do need to add labels to my graph with my units. So I know that I rented a car and I drove miles. So X is miles and Y is money for rental, so that'll be dollars. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here. So we'll say X miles and we're going to put Y cost to rent the car. And we'll put a $sign for our unit. Then they're going to export and insert their graph. So they click on this little share button and click export image and take this picture and put that on the slide. Alright, so now it says it needs the table. So we're going to put the table in there and we'll do a screen capture to get that. So we'll go back to the slide and we'll put our table in here. Now I had somebody ask me, well, where do you put, does it matter where they put it? No, it doesn't matter. As long as it's not covering up anything of super importance. Like I wouldn't want their labels to be covered up. So I would move this over. I'll make this smaller. Then shrink it down. But just make sure it's on there somewhere. That looks pretty good. Alright. That's it. So they'll just need the graph and the table. And they've got all that they need. Alright, let's go to the next slide. Now the next one says use the same graph to answer these questions. How much will it cost to rent the car if they drove 240 miles? Well, that number was actually in the table. It said 116. So this Y value is going to go up to 116. So this number should be 116. This value should be the lowest cost. And believe it or not, that is not 0. It's 0 is $56. So they must be paying them $56 just to sign up to get the car. So let's go ahead and put that here. Then it says to add that range to a separate row and insert a new graph on the slide. So we're going to go back to this same thing and add the range. So we're going to start with 56 less than or equal to Y less than or equal to 116. And that is the range. Now you can leave it like that, or if they don't like the color, this came out black, which is kind of hard to see. I think I'll do orange. That's a little brighter. Then they can see it better. And then I'm going to export and insert this graph again with that range shaded in. So I would copy that and paste that on my slide. And then we have another problem. I'm not going to do this one with you, but I will create a demo for this one, another video for this one if you want to see it, just to see what this one looks like. And this time I do have them actually restrict their domain and do the zoom fit. They do it all. So they get very little help this time in the calculator. The table is also empty, so they'll have to fill it in. They have to go to 100, so I would not recommend counting by ones, maybe by 10s or 20s, so that they don't have so many. And that is your last activity. So this is an important lesson. Again, you're repeating a lot of the same concepts over and over. with the girl on the slide, we're doing a function and a context. We have at least a couple more assignments with that that's going to keep coming back. So I really harp on that a lot because it's an important thing to know. Still working on your assessment, so let me know if you have any questions, and y'all have a great day.